Okay, so in the last video we got our lower arm clone in place. In this video I want to go ahead and get our ulnar and radius bones created and working so that we can conclude the creation of our arm deform rig. So I'm going to jump into the top view with space 2, and I want to bring the visibility of our skeleton geometry back. And we're going to create two bones, one for our ulnar and one for our radius. So I'm going to activate the bones tool, and I'll give this a chain name of L. I want these to simply be bones, no kinematics applied just yet. And I want to have a bone for the ulnar. Now the pivot point for the ulnar is right around here. We can see there's a curve of the ulnar. It might be clearer if we turn on shaded. We can see the ulnar going around, wrapping around that upper arm bone. So the pivot point sits right in around about here. So I'm actually going to create the pivot for that quite close to the elbow position. And then I want the end for the ulnar to be down this end of the arm, so somewhere right around here. Enter to accept that. Let's give these guys the name L_ulnar root and L_ulnar. I want to jump into a perspective view and get these oriented in the perspective view. So I'm going to grab both of these guys, translate them up in Y. So let's get this positioned right around where the ulnar attaches into our upper arm bone. So just a tad higher. Something like so. And then let's grab this end on its own. So I just have this end on its own now. And I'll translate that up towards where the ulnar attaches to the wrist. So that's the ulnar in place. I jump back into the top view, into a wireframe. I'm going to create a new bone for our radius. So I'm going to create a bone starting from around about the radius's end point, going towards the end of the radius where it attaches to the wrist. This end isn't quite as important as this end, since this end is going to be where the bone pivots from. This end is simply going to be where we position the end effectors for those bones. But if you think about it, yeah, we're going to have the end effector position there, but we're having nothing parented off of them, which means that it doesn't matter if they're a little bit shorter or a little bit longer than they need to be. So we can jump back into a perspective view. If we enter to accept that, I'm going to name that to L_radius root and L_radius. And let's go ahead and grab both of those, position this up in Y. Let's go ahead and get that positioned in Y for the radius. So that needs to come up just slightly, something like that. And then make sure that this end, and I've just selected that end on its own, make sure that that end is down where the radius bone attaches to the wrist. So something right around there is going to work out fantastically for us. So we've got those bones in place. So we'll go ahead and deselect the bones tool there. Let's jump back up to object level. Now we can go ahead and I'm going to turn off visibility and selectability on the roots, selectability on the bones, and set the bone color to be a deep medium orangey yellow. So now that we've got those in place, I want to create stretchy IK for those bones. So I'm going to select our stretchy IK tool and grab our ulnar as the start bone, enter to confirm. Let's grab our ulnar as the end bone, enter to confirm. I do want to go ahead and grab the stretch start, move that up with our ulnar, and let's rename this IK handle to L_ulnar IK handle. We can also jump inside the Kinchops network and rename the IK solver that was just created to L_ulnar kinematics. Fantastic. Let's repeat that now for our radius. So stretchy IK, select start bone, that would be our radius, enter. And again for the end bone, enter. I want to grab that stretch start, move that up to where our network is. Let's grab our IK handle, rename that to L_radius IK handle. Let's go ahead and jump inside our chop network, and let's rename that newly created IK solver to L underscore radius kinematics. We can now grab the bones, their nulls for the root and their stretch start, as well as the IK handles. So all the newly created object nodes for our radius and ulnar setup, and let's move those over towards where we're working with our arm. So we've got those nodes and they're all in place. Now I do want to get their end effectors, their IK handles, which currently are just in world space, but if we were to move one of these or both of these, you can see our bones are stretching once they go longer than the arm. I do want to get these so that they will stretch based on the position of our arm and roll around based on the rotation of our wrist. That means I need them parented in to the end of our lower arm clone. Now we don't want to just parent them into the lower arm clone itself, because then when the lower arm clone changes length based on our stretchy IK or stretchy FK, those end effectors aren't going to move. We actually need to have a null that sits at the very end of the lower arm clone, and when that moves based on the length of the bone or the orientation of the bone, then that will affect our end effectors. So I'm going to wire a null off of our lower arm clone, which I'll name L underscore end of lower arm clone. And let's translate this in Z, a negative of the L underscore lower arm clone length. So we're going to translate right down to the end of the lower arm clone. And now that we have that, we can parent our radius and ulnar IK handles underneath it. So I'm going to grab both of those IK handles. Let's jump back up. Grab both of those IK handles, making sure we're keeping position when parenting. I'll parent them to that null. We can take away their node color since they're not really control objects, they're just helper objects for our rig. I'm going to turn off their visibility and selectability and that of the end of the lower arm clone null as well. I'm also going to turn off the visibility of the lower arm clone, and while we're there, turn off the visibility of our skeleton, so all we can see are our ulnar and radius. Fantastic. So now if we grab our wrist and were to rotate our wrist around, you can see that that's causing the ends of the ulnar and radius bones to rotate around. So they're not crossed there, and they are crossed when our palm is facing up. Now, of course, currently our elbow is set in such a way that if you were to hold your left hand or left arm out to your side, your elbow's facing forwards. We know if our palm is facing down, then those bones aren't crossed. If our palm faces all the way down, then those bones are crossed, and as that palm faces up to facing forwards, then those bones are completely not crossed. So that's the kind of motion we're getting with our bones there. When our palm is facing forwards from the front view, they're completely not crossed, and as our palm faces behind the character, they go to being completely crossed. And that's the kind of range of motion that we are expecting with our arm setup. Your arm can't really go further than those points without the shoulder having to move. Your wrist can really only go round to, with the elbow set up as it is in our character, palm facing forwards or palm facing backwards. It can't go any further around than that. So that's actually working out fantastically for us. So now that we've got those bones in place, we do need to deal with the ends of the bones, because currently if we were to grab our FK control and move that, you can see that those bones are moving, but they're moving because of the end effectors moving, and their pivot points up here aren't actually moving. And we want their pivot points to move with our lower arms, since obviously we want that pivot needs to move with the movement of our lower arm. So I'm going to go ahead and get these parented in, and to do that I need to grab the ulnar root and the radius root, and I'm going to parent them to our lower arm. So I'm going to grab both of those, making sure we keep in position when parenting, and I'll parent them into our L underscore lower arm. Now if we were to come in and grab our FK control, you can see they're moving as well as their end effectors moving, and that's giving us, when our arm bends at the elbow, we know that when our arm bends at the elbow, the relationship between the ulnar and radius doesn't really change. We didn't want to have them where they get to a point where they cross over because their pivot points aren't moving. And of course, otherwise, if we move the entire rig, they would still stay there, and that would be very, very unusual indeed. So we've got the ulnar and radius in place. but we don't yet have it working in such a way where we have two ulnar bones and two radius bones, giving us one that twists down the wrist end and one that doesn't twist at the upper end. Now this is going to be really easy to achieve. The first part of this is to jump onto each of these bones, both the ulnar and the radius, take their existing length parameter and divide that by 2. So I'm going to do that for the ulnar, and I'm going to do that for the radius. So take the entirety of the current length parameter, putting that in parentheses, and dividing that by 2. So that's now given us the ulnar and radius bones that do not roll, because we know that currently those bones aren't indeed rolling. We can see that instead of rolling, they are only rotating in their x-axis. They're not twisting around on their z-axis. And we need to go ahead and get the second part of those bones that will twist around on the z-axis. To do that, I'm simply going to wire a new bone off of our L underscore ulnar. So I'm going to right click and wire a new bone. And this is going to be our L underscore ulnar lower. Let's give this a node color of that deep orange, turn off selectability. In terms of length, I want it to reference the ulnar's bone length so that they always maintain a 50-50 relationship. One goes to the halfway point, the other all the way to the wrist. So the bone length is going to be L underscore ulnar length. And you can see that updating there. Let's do the same for our radius. I'm going to create a new bone from our radius. L underscore radius lower. And I want to go ahead and make sure that that references the bone length of our radius. So I'm going to reference our L underscore radius length for that bone as well. Now what we can do, we can set up inverse kinematics on these bones so that they point at the same end effectors that our ulnar and radius are pointing at, and we know that currently that will cause no real change on those bones because they should be touching those end effectors based on their length being correct and based on the fact they've just inherited the orientation of our ulnar and our radius. However, once we have inverse kinematics in place driving these bones, we can then create a twist effector. Actually, we can use the same twist effector that we use for the lower arm clone, but we can set them up to use a twist effector, and that will cause them to roll just as our lower arm clone bone was rolling as well. So I'm going to go ahead and create 2 new inverse kinematics chops down inside our kin chops network. So inverse kin. The first is going to be our L underscore ulnar lower kinematics. We obviously want a solver type of inverse kinematics. The root bone will be at L underscore ulnar lower. So will our end bones. Let's make sure that that took, and it did. The end effector will be our L underscore ulnar IK handle. And the twist effector is going to be that L underscore lower arm clone twist effector. We're going to use the same twist effector that's sat out here, since as that rolls around, that will cause our bones to twist around as well. So that's our ulnar lower kinematics. Let's create a new inverse kin chop and rename this to L underscore radius lower kinematics. I want this to have inverse kinematics with a root bone of the L underscore radius lower. The same for our end bone as well. Let's make sure that that took, and it did. The end effector in this case will be our L underscore radius IK handle. And that twist effector is going to be that same twist effector that we had before. So that's the L underscore lower arm clone twist effector. With those in place, if we reference them on our bones, so on our ulnar lower, we want to grab that ulnar lower kinematics. So there's the ulnar lower kinematics. You can see that doesn't really change anything other than the graphical representation in the view. On our kinematic solver for the radius lower, we want the radius lower kinematics. Again, just the graphical representation changing. So now if we were to rotate our arm, you can see they're just acting as if they were one long bone. However, when we come in and roll our arm, we're going to see that those bones at the end are rolling with our wrist, as the wrist control goes a bit crazy there, are rolling with our wrist, whereas the upper part of those bones are not rolling with the wrist, but the bone as a whole is pivoting so that you can see the entire bone chain as a whole there is rotating to accommodate the movement of the end effector. but these bones are twisting to accommodate the twist motion of the arm. So we now have these 4 bones, the upper and lower parts of our ulna and radius, that we could use to capture our lower arm geometry, and that would allow us to get some very nice weighting for our lower arm geometry. And that's actually going to conclude our arm deform rig. Thanks a lot, everyone.